For about 72 hours after every payday, your bank account holds more money than it will at any other point this month. It feels like the safest moment you'll have all month. It is actually the most decisive one, and almost no one treats it that way. Maybe you know the feeling. The paycheck lands, and for a moment, the balance looks bigger than it actually is. You take care of the obvious things. Rent, maybe a transfer towards savings if there's room. Then comes something smaller. A delivery order, a purchase you've been thinking about for a week, a few extra items at the store that weren't on the list. None of it feels reckless. Each choice looks completely reasonable on its own. But this is where the trap begins. The total spent can be identical. The financial result is not. And the order, what gets claimed first and what gets left to chance, is set in those first 72 hours, whether anyone plans it or not. Most people assume the real danger shows up later, in the third week, when spending money runs low, or near the end of the month, when the account starts feeling tight. But that is not where the story actually starts. It starts in the first 3 days, while the balance still looks full and untouched. By the time the account feels tight, the decisions that caused it were made weeks earlier, in a moment that felt completely safe. And almost nobody goes back to look at that moment again. The common explanation is simple. People spend too much right after getting paid because the money is sitting there, and in the moment, temptation wins. The fix, according to this explanation, is willpower. Hold back for the first few days, and the rest of the month takes care of itself. This is not entirely wrong. People do spend more when a paycheck first arrives, but this explanation focuses on the wrong target. It treats the spending itself as the problem. And once you look closely, the amount of money that leaves an account in those first 72 hours is rarely the part that actually matters. Here is the reversal. Two people can spend the exact same amount of money in the same 72 hours and end up in completely different positions a month later. The difference is not how much money left the account. It is what that money was supposed to do before it left. One person's spending happens after rent, minimum payments, and a transfer to savings have already been accounted for. The other person's spending happens first, while the money still looks unclaimed before anything has been set aside, not in any single decision, but in the order those decisions happen in. This is the hidden mechanism, and it has more to do with timing than with self-control. The moment a paycheck lands, the brain registers the full number as available money, even though parts of it are already spoken for. Rent, scheduled to leave in a few days. A subscription that renews next week. A car payment due in the middle of the month. None of that has technically happened yet, so none of it feels real. For those first few days, the gap between what looks available and what is actually available is wider than at any other point in the month. That gap does not announce itself. There is no warning label on the balance that says, this part is already gone. So discretionary spending slips into that gap quietly. Not because anyone is being careless, but because the money has not yet been separated in the mind from the money that is already on its way out the door. Picture someone we'll call Daniel. For this example, say his take-home pay is around $2,000 every 2 weeks, a number chosen only to make the pattern easy to follow, not as any kind of average. The day it arrives, his rent is scheduled to leave the account 3 days later, taking around $900. A streaming bundle and a couple of small subscriptions renew within the week, adding up to roughly $60. His car payment is due in 12 days. None of this has left yet. So on payday, the number Daniel sees is the full $2,000. In the first 3 days, before rent even goes out, he orders dinner twice instead of cooking, buys something online he had been considering for a while, and picks up a few extra items at the grocery store that weren't part of his plan. Altogether, maybe $150. It feels like nothing, less than 8% of the paycheck. But that $150 was never extra money. It was part of the cushion that was supposed to absorb whatever came up later. A smaller than expected check, a higher grocery bill, an unexpected expense in week 3. Multiply that pattern across 12 pay periods a year, and it stops being a one-time decision. It becomes the rhythm of an entire financial life. Payday brings a short window of relief. The days before the next payday bring a familiar tightness, sometimes just mild stress, sometimes enough to reach for a credit card to cover the gap. Just this once, and then again the month after. The balance never fully resets because the cushion that should be forming underneath it keeps getting spent in those first 72 hours before it ever has a chance to grow. Daniel is not failing by any visible measure. His income covers his expenses. On paper, everything balances. But the small amount absorbed early every month means the buffer never builds. And a buffer that never builds is the reason a single bad month, a car repair, a slow week at work, an unexpected bill, can turn into a balance carried on a credit card instead of a temporary dip that resolves on its own. Why does this keep happening, even to people who understand the math? Part of it is timing of stress. The first 72 hours after payday are often the lowest pressure days of the entire month. The bills feel handled, at least for the moment, and that sense of relief naturally looks for somewhere to go. After weeks of careful spending, something small feels earned rather than risky. There is also a simple distortion in how the mind treats time. Money scheduled to leave the account in 4 days feels less real than money that is sitting in the account right now. The future deduction is abstract, a date on a calendar. The present balance is concrete, a number on a screen. So, attention follows what it can see, not what it already knows is coming. This is not a discipline problem in the way it is usually described. It is closer to a timing problem, built into the basic relationship between money, attention, and time. The real cost of this pattern is not the $150, or whatever the specific number happens to be for any given person. The real cost is the loss of the one window each month when there is genuine room to make a decision. For about 72 hours, the account is in the strongest position it will be in all month. That is the moment when an extra payment toward debt, a transfer into savings, or simply a deliberate pause carries the most weight, because the money is actually there, not just theoretically there. Instead, that window tends to get filled by default, by whatever feels good in the moment, and the next time real flexibility appears is not for another 2 to 4 weeks. The cost is not only financial, it is the loss of the single moment in the month when a person has the most control over what happens next, spent before anyone realizes it was the moment that mattered. Here is a different way to use that window. Before any discretionary spending happens in the first 72 hours after payday, ask one question. Has this money already been assigned a job? Not a budget category in an app. An actual job. Rent? The next bill. A transfer to savings. An extra payment somewhere that's been waiting. If the answer is no, that money is not free. It is simply unclaimed for now, sitting in a gap between what it looks like and what it is. The shift is not to spend less in those first 3 days. It is to assign the paycheck's jobs before the first discretionary purchase happens so that whatever is left afterward is genuinely available, not just temporarily unclaimed, waiting to disappear before anyone notices it was ever spoken for. Once this becomes visible, payday looks different. The feeling of having money and the reality of having a choice about it are not the same thing. And the gap between them is largest right when the paycheck first arrives. The first 72 hours were never dangerous because of what they tempted anyone to buy. They were significant because they were the only moment in the month that mattered for what came after, and almost no one was looking at them that way. Seeing that clearly is not about guilt, it is about timing, and timing can change. For about 72 hours after every payday, the account holds more money than it will at any other point that month. That part has not changed. What can change is what those 72 hours get used for. Not as a reward and not as a punishment, but as the one window where the next 4 weeks are still undecided and still, for a short time, yours to direct. If this helped you see your paycheck a little differently, consider subscribing for more.